TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News, broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, the IDF has destroyed over 3,200 Hezbollah targets along southern Lebanon with Israel over the past month alone. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken asserts the need to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701 for southern Lebanon as soon as possible. Russian President Vladimir Putin claims that Moscow's support for Tehran aims at avoiding a high-intensity regional war between Iran and Israel. Israel pushes on in its battle against Islamist terrorists, including in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon in particular, where significant achievements have been reported. However, gains made on the Lebanese front have come at a heavy cost, with at least 10 IDF soldiers killed in two separate incidents in the southern part of the war-torn Lebanon, alongside 7 soldiers who sustained serious injuries.
We wish a quick recovery to the wounded and embrace the families of the fallen. Over the holiday, Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets, missiles, and UAVs, unfortunately resulting in casualties. I repeat, the Home Front Command's guidelines save lives: entering protected areas, closing the windows and doors in the protected areas, exiting vehicles and lying down by the roadside, and waiting 10 minutes due to shrapnel from interceptions. These actions save lives. It is crucial to follow these instructions and act responsibly to prevent further casualties. We are continuously assessing the situation, and as of now, there are no changes to the Home Front Command's guidelines. Stay alert, and we will update you immediately if anything changes.
As was mentioned by Admiral Hagari, a number of projectiles that were launched by Hezbollah managed to penetrate Israel's aerial defense array, striking at a number of northern Israeli communities, including the city of Carmiel.
Today around midday, a rocket fell here, very close to a residential apartment in a residential building. We evaluated a man who was probably injured by shrapnel or fragments of broken glass. Lucky he got out of the apartment.
We heard sirens, we ran to the shelter, then 10 seconds later we heard explosions, and then few seconds later, we heard a huge explosion. After we left the shelter, we saw debris and broken windows.
IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari went on to highlight that the IDF continues to successfully dismantle Hezbollah terror infrastructure along the border, which the Iranian proxy had worked years to create.
For years, Hezbollah has planned to invade Israel. Our forces that are currently in the field are exposing Hezbollah's methods. First, they turned civilian villages into fortified combat zones. From there, they moved closer to the border, converting those areas into fortified staging grounds hidden under dense overgrowth. In these locations, they placed weapons, explosives, motorcycles, and more in order to launch attacks on northern communities. In the past year, the Northern Command has conducted a series of strikes and targeted operations against this infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Over the past month, our forces have been operating in southern Lebanon, in both villages and dense thicket areas near the border. The goal is to push Hezbollah away from the border, dismantle its capabilities, and eliminate the threat to northern residents.
A battalion CEO of the 2nd Brigade of the 146th Division, Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve Gonin, whose troops had located and destroyed dozens of tunnels in recent weeks, provides a glimpse into the contents of a rapid deployment tunnel from which Hezbollah intended to attack Israel's northern communities.
We are at an underground weapons storage facility that was dug here, dozens of meters from the border fence in thicket mountainous terrain. There are enough weapons here for about an IDF-sized company, mortar shells, explosives for fence crossings, shoulder-fired missiles, combat vests, communication devices, helmets, ammunition, medical equipment, weapons, AK-47S, PK, sniper rifles. All of this was intended so that residents would come to this point, near the border fence, will put on combat gear and immediately attack the citizens of Israel. Inside the cave you can see the compound where all the weapons were. There are also food supplies and mattresses here, and in the coming hours we will make sure that this thing is destroyed, and the relevant weapons we will take with us.
It is important to highlight that the IDF had already struck over 3,200 such subterranean targets in recent weeks.
In the past month alone, we have struck more than 3,200 targets in southern Lebanon, including approximately 350 weapons storage facilities. Here, you can see a few of the weapons our forces have uncovered in southern Lebanon. So far, we have seized more than 3,200 explosives and approximately 2,500 anti-tank missiles, RPGs, launchers, and Cornet missiles. Additionally, we seized drones, combat vests, helmets, and a large amount of ammunition. Part of the weapons were destroyed on site, while others were transferred for investigation and documentation by the Enemy Assets Confiscation Unit under the IDF's Technology and Logistics Directorate. The amount of weapons we are discovering emphasizes the significance of our targeted ground operations in removing the threat communities in northern Israel face.
Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, IDF Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi toured the Jabalia area in the northern part of the enclave, during the course of which he conducted a situational assessment with the commanding officer of Southern Command, Major General Yaron Finkelman, alongside the commanding officer of the 162nd Division, Brigadier General Itzik Cohen, and additional field commanders. Initially addressing the state of affairs in Lebanon, General Halevi revealed that he believes that there is a possibility of reaching a sharp conclusion to the war versus the Iranian proxy.
In the north, there's a possibility of reaching a sharp conclusion. We thoroughly dismantled Hezbollah's senior chain of command.
General Halevi went on to highlight that while the elimination of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar was not planned, it was the result of the IDF's unyielding resolve to maintain operational hold of the southern Gazan border town of Rafah.
Sinwar's elimination wasn't planned, and neither were the 450th Brigade troops there, nor the Tank Commander Course Unit. They didn't know who they were targeting. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't random either. It wasn't by chance. It's methodical, the result of pressure on Rafah, the result of the dismantling of the Rafah Brigade. It's also the result of the regional command that insisted on deploying more troops there during this holiday month, pushing further forward, maintaining operational hold on the territory, and encountering the problem head-on. It's methodical, not coincidence.
The IDF Chief of Staff continued by stressing that while the enemy remains determined to survive, its aspirations to maintain a hold of Gaza will fail, further highlighting that Hamas has yet again lost control of Jabalia.
Determination and persistence, that's the key. Now, they are determined too, but we are much more. Because we are better, we are more justified, and also because we are stronger. Another achievement, Jabalia has fallen. This is another psychological collapse, both physically and psychologically. And if we take out the Northern Gaza Brigade commander, it's another collapse. These moves, again, I don't know what we'll encounter tomorrow, but this pressure brings us closer to more achievements.
Turning to England's capital, London, where Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, deceitfully claiming that Israel was committing ethnic cleansing in the northern Gazan town of Jabalia, while further highlighting the Hashemite Kingdom's demand for an immediate end to Israel's defensive ground maneuver in Lebanon, stopping short, of course, of expressing any sense of outrage over the belligerent year-long cross-border attacks against civilians of northern Israel by Iran's proxy Hezbollah.
As you mentioned, the humanitarian situation is really difficult. We look at northern Gaza now, where we do see ethnic cleansing taking place, and that has got to stop. In Lebanon, I think the Lebanese government is clear now. It wants to implement Resolution 1701, so that should be implemented and save, again, hundreds, thousands of lives that are being killed. The aggression in Lebanon has to stop immediately. Nothing justifies its continuation. Lebanon is ready to implement 1701. That will guarantee the security of all. My short answer is yes, it's got to stop now.
Secretary Blinken, for his part, highlighted the imperative to reach a conclusion to the war in Lebanon by implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701.
The most important thing is to drive toward the diplomatic resolution to get the understandings that are necessary for the full implementation of 1701. And the sooner we're able to do that, the sooner we're able to get a resolution. Meanwhile, we want to see civilians protected. We want to make sure that Lebanese armed forces are not caught in the crossfire, and certainly we want to make sure that in places like Beirut there is a real effort to make sure that people are not harmed, that civilians are not caught up in this crossfire.
Meanwhile, in Washington, Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh addressed a question regarding the delayed arrival of the USS Harry S. Truman strike group to the eastern Mediterranean, as was initially anticipated.
In terms of the Harry S. Truman, first, let me remind you that in the CENTCOM AOR, we still have the Lincoln operating. The Truman, as I know folks track where our ships are moving, was always scheduled to do this exercise. It was a planned exercise. She is in the EUCOM AOR continuing to operate. I don't have any announcements to make on her movements other than that she could, continue to operate within the EUCOM AOR, which includes the Mediterranean. But it's important to remember that we've not only have the ABE operating in the CENTCOM AOR, we've augmented our airframes as well. And so, we have a lot of air power in the region, and of course, as you're tracking, we also have the THAAD battery that's in Israel. So, for more on the Harry S. Truman, I'd refer you to EUCOM or the Navy to speak to her movements, but I don't have anything to announce today.
Singh was further asked whether Israel's anticipated strike on Iran was effectively delayed due to the American intelligence leak to an Iranian outlet of Israeli preparations for the attack.
The FBI is the lead agency when it comes to the leak of classified documents, and that DoD is feeding into that investigation. It's in the early days, so we have to let the investigation take its course. In terms of any impact to Israeli operations or when Israel chooses to respond, that's not really something I can speak to.
Meanwhile, in the Russian city of Kazan, President Vladimir Putin, in a culminating press conference of the BRICS summit, addressed Russia's support for Iran, which includes electronic warfare systems, among others, claiming Moscow's support for Tehran intended to create conditions to settling the situation by finding mutual compromise.
Кто бы чего ни говорил, Россия не заинтересована.
No matter what anyone says, Russia is not interested in the conflict getting worse. We will not gain anything from it strategically, only more problems. Regarding assistance to Iran, first of all, of course, we are in touch with the leadership of Iran and a very close contact. We see our role in creating conditions to settling the situation by finding mutual compromises. I think it is possible. The talks I had at the sidelines of the BRICS summit show that nobody in the region wants the conflict to expand and any sort of a big war. Nobody.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. I would like to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. Separately, if you're blessed by our productions, which are exclusively donation-based, please consider supporting our programs with a donation. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. I'm Jonathan Essen, wishing you a Shabbat Shalom U'Mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.